Now, who owns the moon? That's an interesting topic. The Wall Street Journal had an article recently that talked about how the United States and many other countries in I think it was 1967, where they signed an agreement that the moon is like the deep ocean, that no one nation owns the moon. So they signed this in the 1960s, including the United States. But then the United States, under Obama in 2015, issued a particular order that said, no, the United States will have the rights to mine the moon for minerals and such that it desires and seeks. So that kind of then started spinning the other nations around, including China, Japan, UAE. All those countries also issued proclamations that they want to mine the moon. So who owns it? Is there going to be war over the moon? I'm not sure. I have not investigated this aspect of this subject, or what type of minerals, if we know, would probably exist in a large amount on the moon. I don't know that. If anybody knows that, let me know. You can put that in the comments. So I'm not sure if there's a certain amount of chemical or minerals in the moon that would be mined that are valuable, whether it's gold, silver, or have you. I don't know. What would be interesting if they found oil on the moon, right? I don't know if that's even possible, if they already know that chemically that's not possible. I don't know. But that would be interesting, right? Because there goes their dinosaur theory. If there's oil under the moon's surface. I'm not saying there is. My guess is there's not. The moon agreement is the flip side of the 2015 U.S. statute. And it prohibits, and this is a recent one, also signed in 2015 by a host of countries, that prohibits, I quote, the commercial exploitation of the lunar surfaces or resources, excuse me, and it declared, this international proclamation declared that the moon is a quote, a common heritage of all mankind, and they wanted the same international law in place for the moon that they have for the deep seabed on the earth. So that's what most of the international community wants. There's some rogue nations, if you will. I don't know if that's a proper term, whether that would be the way to do it, because perhaps the folks that get there on the moon and start mining it are kind of like a Columbus. But there's only a few countries, Japan, India, China, United States, that want the minerals for themselves if they have access to it. So that's interesting. So we also have, obviously, the big groups as we celebrate 50 years that the United States sent and landed men on the moon. We have large groups of people, large, not percentage-wise, but they're significant, and some are pretty smart, that advocate that we never ever landed on the moon. It's all a big hoax. Some Christians buy into that. Some Christians buy into a lot of conspiracies. I would encourage you not to, unless there's really, really solid proof. As I've investigated a lot of conspiracies, and I just want the truth. I don't need us to have landed on the moon to make my day, right? I don't need that. I don't need Elvis to be dead or alive. It doesn't matter to me. I don't need to know that Oswald was the lone assassinator on Kennedy. I don't need to know that. I don't need to have my position be the right one. I just want to know what the truth is. That's all I want. And that's what Christians should yearn for. Why? Because we serve the God of truth. We have the word of truth. The Father sent the Spirit of truth. And Jesus said he was the way and the truth and the life. So we should be people of the truth. Oh, by the way, what I'm drinking, people ask me from time to time, is Isopure. What it is it's a protein drink. It's not an energy drink. There's nothing bad for you. In fact, I've never had an energy drink. Some of you know I'm also a certified nutritionist. This is a protein drink with no caffeine, no other types of uppers. It's not an energy drink, but it has whey protein isolates in it. And so I drink that. I don't drink, and I don't recommend energy drinks. Stay away from those. Well, I can't make it this. Oh, you'll make it. You'll make it. If you get away from too much coffee, Coffee is good for you in small doses without all the creamer. I've never had a drink of coffee either. Just the way I was brought up, it doesn't make it morally right. It's just a fact. I haven't had any coffee. I actually wish I had drank coffee at this point, but it's such a strong odor and seems to be such a strong taste from what I gather. I don't want to start drinking coffee. I drink tea instead. I never drank tea until I was in my late 30s. So coffee is good for you as long as you don't add the sugar and the cream. But 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cups of coffee, I don't think so. That can't be good for your blood pressure or your heart. Energy drinks. What's interesting about energy drinks is a lot of young people drink them. People in their late teens or their 20s, maybe 30s. It's dangerous for everybody. You never know which energy drink can give you a stroke or give you a heart attack or take you out. You just don't know. The odds are with you. It probably won't happen, but you just don't know. And for young people, it could be more challenging because a young person's heart, if they're healthy and they're average, their heart's really strong. And if you set that strong heart a racing, it's going to go faster and stronger than an older, more mature person because their heart tissue just isn't as strong and robust. So if you have a strong, young, robust heart and you add the energy drink to it, boom, that's why so many young people have died drinking energy drinks. Don't do it. You don't need it. If you need energy for a specific day, I would recommend red tea. Red tea is not a caffeinated, adrenal-based energy, okay? I know I'm getting off of nutrition. I'll close this up really quick. As a nutritionist, I read all the journals and I stay up on it. But red tea, last tip, and then I'll be done with the nutrition thing. Red tea is not the same plant as black tea, green tea, and white tea. Those three are the same plant, okay? Just processed different. Green, black, and white tea. All very, very good for you. I'd recommend red tea. Red tea, it's kind of hard to find. You can get it on Amazon real easy. And it's not hibiscus tea, which is the color. It's colored red, hibiscus. No, red tea is a different type of tea than hibiscus tea. Red tea, when you drink it, the first time I drank it, I wasn't expecting much because I always have energy. I'm never sleepy and tired and all that stuff. I don't take naps. I'm just not sleepy. I exercise really hard with a lot of heavy weights. And so I just don't get tired, right? When I go to sleep, I go to sleep. So I wasn't really expecting anything. I didn't really need anything, I thought, when I drank this first cup of red tea that I had. But about half an hour after I drank this red tea, I started feeling, whoa, man, I feel strong. I feel real strong. I didn't feel this epinephrine rush, this adrenal rush, like coffee or some other caffeine based drink. But I felt really strong and energized that way within my muscles. Now, it might have just all been in my head, but I wasn't expecting it. And research has borne that out. Red tea is very, very good for that. So I would go with red tea and not an energy drink. That's my little diatribe today. Obviously, it's not immoral to drink an energy drink. Perhaps it's not wise for your health. Now, the moon landing. Folks say, well, you know, there's no proof we went to the moon. There's all this counter proof. You know, the photos have been, you know, we can see they've been doctored and the lighting problem and this and that. It's impossible to get to the moon. What is all this? Well, I know, you know, my position is that we went to the moon. I think it's a pretty clear case. I've been debating folks for almost a year now on this subject. And all their arguments, all their videos, all the information they give has been refuted, not by me. I'm not a main researcher on the moon landings. I've just done my own research from those who give us the documentation. What's interesting, though, is that when you think about the moon landing, what it took to get there, over 60% of all the computer chips that were manufactured from 1962 to 1967 were used for those trips. So there's something that's kind of some tacit information, background information that sure lines up with the idea of getting to the moon, that we put all this money and resource into computer chips for that. It was faked. Why did we do that? To cover ourselves up? Well, if you've studied this issue, you've probably never heard anybody bring that up as a possible fact that helps substantiate the idea that we went to the moon. But here you have it, right? I only saw that in a particular area that I was researching, and I saw that. I go, oh, look at that. Why would that be the case if they were faking it? Okay, that's not obviously a knockdown argument at all, but it fits in with the background web of us going to the moon. The other thing that's real interesting is recently the computers that were used for the moon landing. Here it is. This is hard to refute. I mean, you could say, yeah, there's a whole bunch of other people lying now about it, but researchers Jimmy Locke, Mike Stewart, and Mark Verdelli, these guys got the original computers from NASA, okay, and they wired them back up, fired them back up, and they found all the same materials in there that we went to the moon. So these guys had nothing directly related to the folks that got to the moon. They just got the computers 50 years later and went through the computer and found, yep, all the materials there that we went to the moon. You could say, well, they kept it in there all that time to fake us out. I don't know. That takes a lot. Again, if you have to really, really embrace a conspiracy just to be different, just so you can't lose face because you've put some energy in believing this conspiracy, that's not a good reason to hold to conspiracies. The truth is what matters. The truth will set us free. If it can be proved that we did not land on the moon, if it can be proved that Elvis is still alive, if it can be proved that Area 51 has little green men in it, and we see it, that's what I'm going to believe. I'm going to believe what's true. None of those particular conspiracies is going to shock my world whatsoever. I was a tiny little kid when we got to the moon. I don't remember it. I'm not a big astronaut buff. I'm not a big Apollo buff. I think we did go to the moon. I think the evidence, as I'm about to give you, is substantial and powerful. And that's great. We made it to the moon. India right now is planning trips to get there. Now think of where India was in the 60s and 70s, and now they're going to get to the moon. So if they can get to the moon now, it would seem to make sense that, yeah, we could make it in the 60s, because India has been such a backward country for so long, and such a large country with a huge amount of poverty, that's interesting also. Again, that's not necessarily any proof that we got to the moon, but it's interesting that India right now is preparing to go to the moon and to start finding out about the lunar surface and digging in there and getting some more research from there. Now, the main contention in most moon landing conspiracy theories is that the moon landings were faked on a Hollywood-type soundstage with actors, a set, and a professional lighting that was aimed at imitating the moon surface. There are countless articles and books and YouTube videos dedicated, many with great zeal, to propagate this conspiracy. A lot of folks make a lot of money on that issue. Yet in the 1960s and 1970s, the USSR, communist atheist country who hated us, China, communist atheist country that hated the United States, Vietnam, all those countries, and the Eastern European countries utterly hated America. All the atheist nations, their hatred towards us would have been a great motivation to expose that the United States did not actually land on the moon, to embarrass us and to demonstrate that the USSR was more powerful than the United States, that China is number one and the United States is not. If we had to fake and had this incredible fraud to bring forth a conspiracy that we landed on the moon, the Soviets and the Chinese, the folks in Vietnam and Eastern Europe, all they'd have to do is expose it. Soviets had very, very powerful telescopes, as did China. They could have exposed it very, very easily. They had satellites up there around our globe. They could have exposed it. More importantly, about 10 years ago, this is something that a lot of people don't know. The Apollo 15 site was photographed by the Japanese lunar orbiter called the Selene. And the pictures confirm that the Apollo 15 site is on the moon, just where we landed. So the Japanese proved that we were there. Well, they faked that too, and there's a big conspiracy that the leaders in Japan, wow, you're getting to hundreds and hundreds of people, many which you would think, there's some folks there in the middle class that are involved in all of that, right? Dozens, hundreds probably, that are middle class, maybe upper middle class living. If they could expose this conspiracy, they'd make a fortune. If they had the documentation, they would make a fortune. Now, remember that a few of the 12 men who walked on the moon were also born-again Christians, including Charlie Duke and the late Jim Irwin. So these two devout Christians wrote books in which they shared their testimonies and their experience as astronauts. These two Christian astronauts should be taken as honest witnesses. They're Christians. Are they going to lie publicly all these years to gain money? Possible, but they're born-again Christians, and they told us and wrote about it that yes, we did get to the moon. It seems to be more difficult to fake the moon landing on a stage than would have been actually to get there almost. To fake it, make sure that the secret was kept so the Soviets wouldn't find out, the Chinese wouldn't find out. Of course, Chinese and the Soviets have telescopes, so Now, old people remembering watching TV and the amazing events of July of 1969 when Armstrong walked on the moon, they were thrilled, many of them. Yet some people think we never walked on the moon, that NASA and the government faked the Apollo moon landings. Now, who was the president at that point? Nixon. Now, Nixon's the president. He wins in a landslide, and then his second term he wins in a landslide. He had a lot of enemies. If anybody in the government who was on the other side, the Democratic side, knew that we faked the moon landing, wouldn't they expose Nixon? They hated him. Even before Watergate, they hated him. They loathed Nixon. You can say, well, there's good reasons why they hate him. Well, perhaps. But the point of fact is, the Democrats could have exposed the Republicans by saying, oh, no, this is a big fraud. We never went to the moon. This is a big fake out. And they could have won election after election for decades because of the conspiracy of the Republican president lying about landing men on the moon. Reasons for the conspiracy, of course, vary, from alleged impossibility of traveling to the moon because of the cost overruns to the practical difficulties that made it impossible. All these, of course, have been answered by engineers who study these issues. There's some engineers that say, no, it's impossible, we couldn't have made it. But there's dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of others who refute them. The late 1970s released a movie called Capricorn 1. I don't know if you saw that. I saw it as a little kid. O.J. Simpson was in it. And what it was the movie was about NASA faking the first Mars landing. Not moon, Mars. Okay, that's interesting. Most people think it was a moon landing in the movie. No, it was a Mars landing. This spacecraft depicted in the film looked a lot like the Apollo spacecraft that the astronauts used to land on the moon. Furthermore, large letters at the top of the promotional posters of this movie, of Capricorn 1, asked the question, would you be shocked to find out that the greatest moment of our recent history may not have happened at all? That was the caption on the poster. Many people seem to falsely recall it was about faking the Apollo moon landings. No, it was about a fake Mars landing. One of the main pieces of evidence that the moon landing was faked is a film of the American flag that Armstrong and Aldrin placed on the moon. From the still photos and on video, it appeared the flag's flapping in the wind. There's no wind on the moon. So they're saying, see, that proves that this was done in a studio, the air conditioning unit, or some outside, place where they filmed it had some wind, and so the flag is flapping. The truth is the flag isn't flapping, and people, including Mythbusters, as well as many other folks, have demonstrated the action of the flag is completely compatible with what was happening to the flag. The flag is not blowing in any wind or air conditioning unit. It was moved as it was stuck in the ground and kept flowing its bent shape because of the weak gravity on the moon. So the gravity is different on the moon than it is on the Earth, so the flag acts different. In the film, the flag appears to flap back and forth because when the astronauts were sticking it into the ground, they rotated it back and forth to dig into the lunar surface. This made the flag seem to flow and wave by some wind. This has been demonstrated and broken down frame by frame, as well as others have done the same, have simulated the same action and got the same result. Yet there's a huge amount of footage of flags showing they stood on the lunar surface in precisely the exact position with no wind. No wind. So there's a flag, no wind. Another piece of evidence that men have never landed on the moon is, where are the stars in the moon landing pictures? No stars, zero, only darkness. See? It wasn't done. It was done in some kind of stage. But of course, the fact is, often photographs from space where the gap between light and dark is very significant, and that's to be expected. Again, they've simulated that and redid that, and they found the same results. From the surface, the moon reflects the dominating sunlight, and it looks very bright in the pictures. This brightness drowns out the dim light from the stars in the black sky. And so that's just the way it is. The human eye can adjust and pick out the stars, but unless it's set in the right settings, cameras from that era were not very good with the contrast from deep dark and then the massive light and then the dim lights. So the contrast from the deep dark, the massive light of the sunlight, and the dim lights. Even recently, those on the space station took pictures of the Earth that show a total starless background, but the same dimness regarding the contrast. And remember this, the USSR, China, Eastern Europe absolutely hated the United States of America, and all these atheist nations hated us so much they would have loved to absolutely embarrass the United States of America by exposing a fake moon landing. They couldn't because they knew we got there. USSR conceded that we won the space race. You study that particular history of the space race, the Soviets were ahead of us. They got somebody in space ahead of us. And we thought they would get to the moon ahead of us, but they didn't. And we won. See, there's also that problem of that rock labeled with a C. This is another piece of evidence, so-called evidence, for the fake moon landings. We'll see from Apollo 16 on the moon. In Hollywood movies, props are often lettered for the film crew so they know where to set them. So the idea is that the rock in the photo is a prop that someone must have accidentally placed upside down. Yet in reality, the label isn't there on the rock. They have the original photo and it's not there. The picture of the rock is taken from a much larger photo of the lunar surface. And when you see the original picture, the first photo of the rock before the reproduced pictures, in the original picture, the C isn't there. There it is. The original picture doesn't have the C. It seems that the C was put there when someone made a copy by accident, or a small piece of hair, or something landed on it, but it's not there. There are some modern examples of that also that happened. Now, more importantly, the Apollo 15 site was photographed recently by the Japanese spacecraft called the Selene. So they took pictures of where the Apollo 15 landed, and they show that all the activity that was documented, that did happen, you can see it there in the site. The landscape and the remains of the site of Apollo 15 were captured on film, and they show the same images. It's also interesting, the halo of lunar dust created from the Apollo 15 exhaust is still there, because again, there's no wind on the moon, and the atmosphere is much different than it is on the Earth. And you can still see, amazingly, after all this time, it's amazing, the Japanese took pictures, and you can see the astronauts footprints. Amazing. So that's a lot to fake. That's a lot to pull over. That's a lot of countries to be in on it. Countries that had strong motivations to expose this so-called fake moon landing as being fake, or it actually happened, which is where I think the evidence is insurmountable. Now, the lunar orbiter has been in orbit around the moon for 10 years, and it's taken photographs of Apollo landing sites. These pictures show the Apollo spacecraft in their precise locations, and remarkably, more footprints of the astronauts as they explored the moon. And of course, these photos, as the original landing also proved, the moon is not made of green cheese. So the Apollo landing sites have been independently photographed by an assortment of spacecraft from Japan, China, and India. China's not our friend, right? And if India is getting this space program together so that they can be on the moon soon, which they are, they'd want to be the first people on the moon. So expose the United States now. They have the documentation. Of course, when they go up there and they see the pictures, they see, yes, the Americans were there. Now, the moon rock is also proof. The moon rocks that return, 135 different countries around the world have a moon rock. The United States gave it to 135 different countries. These rocks have withstood every possible examination by scientists, geologists from labs around the world, and they've confirmed that these rocks come from the moon and not the Earth. The Soviet Union's Luna unmanned spacecraft recovered some rocks from the moon in the 1970s. These rocks were also shared, and they are compatible, perfectly compatible with the rocks we brought back in the 60s and early 70s. And again, remember, the USSR, China, Vietnam utterly hated the United States. All the atheist nations hated us and would have loved to expose the United States as a big fraud, that we didn't make it to the moon, when they got their telescopes out and looked and said, nope, they did not get there. This is a big hoax. They never left the atmosphere. That would have been very easy for to demonstrate how weak and dishonest the United States is. And of course, Nixon's enemies, which he had many, would have exposed Nixon as being a big fraud and a big liar by saying that we went to the moon. Now, the fake moon landing theory, I don't think is to be affirmed by Christians. I don't think you should try to be one of those conspiracy buffs. You shouldn't do that. The only conspiracy I see, and I haven't researched them all, so there's some that could be the case, especially some of those that have to do with Clinton. They seem very suspicious, at least on the surface. But the one that seems really compelling is Kennedy's assassination. It seems like there must have been a conspiracy for Kennedy's assassination. That's the one that I see and I can concede at this point. I'm not saying that's for sure. I'm not saying there's a knockdown argument for that, but the evidence is really compelling. The one thing that I did that I couldn't get over with the Kennedy assassination is you have Kennedy's trip being planned to go to Dallas to start helping his renomination process going to LBJ's territory, go to Dallas. And so he went on a certain route. Now, Oswald had already been working at the book depository, already been working there. Now, if it was just Oswald, it would make sense that he just got hired a day or two or so before the assassination, or right when the news knew when Kennedy was going to make that drive by the book depository area. Then get a job there. That would make sense. But having a job there for quite a while, that seems suspicious. That seems like there's something above just Oswald. That he's been working there, and now they're going to have Kennedy drive by there. And Oswald's either going to be part of the assassination team, or he's going to be the patsy. So that's one conspiracy I think might have some legs. I don't know what you guys think out there. You think the Kennedy assassination might be a conspiracy or not? Again, I'm not one who advocates conspiracies. I would tell most Christians stay away from them. just go for what's true. There's enough within the biblical text and the Christian faith that needs to be pressed and placarded to our world and to the lost people and all the moral issues, that we don't need to come up with these conspiracies to discuss. That's my personal opinion. You can do what you want to do. I'm not some mini pope here in Texas. Now, change pace a little bit. Mathematical truths and proving the existence of God. This is really, I'm going to do a whole show on this. I'm thinking next week if they schedule it. Here's an argument from math. Mathematical truths are absolute, infinite, and unchanging and perfect. 1 + 1 = 2. Okay, try to argue against that. It's absolute, infinite, unchanging, and perfect. So, mathematical truths are absolute, infinite, unchanging, and perfect. The human brain is not absolute, infinite, unchanging, and perfect. The physical universe is not absolute, infinite, unchanging, and perfect. Thus, the mind as well as the universe fail to account for mathematical truths. God is absolute, infinite, unchanging, and perfect. God accounts for mathematical truths, like 1 + 1 = 2. There are mathematical truths, thus God must exist. The contrary to this is impossible. And there's really no way to defeat that unless you want to say, and you'd have to go way off to the edge of insanity, beyond irrationality, to say that 1 + 1 is somewhere all the time universally. If you want to deny that, that shows you how irrational you want to be to try to maintain your atheism or your skepticism. If that's where you want to be, there's really no arguing with you. There's no talking to you because you want to be irrational. This is for rational people. That's what proofs and evidence are for. Rational people. They want to deny that, let them deny it. But when I think about the moon and I think about our little solar system here, I think about the cosmos in general, I know that atheism is impossible. Order cannot come from disorder. There's no way. Uniformity cannot come from the accidental. Intelligence cannot come from non-intelligence. We don't see that anywhere, everywhere in the cosmos. Design cannot come from chaos. I don't have enough blind faith to be an atheist and believe that. Personality cannot come from non-personality. We don't see that anywhere, ever. I cannot believe that. Love cannot just come from hard matter. That's just takes too much blind faith to believe that. Something, or as the new atheists now say, everything cannot come from nothing, right? Yeah, they want to define nothing, so it's actually something. So you can see how irrational they want to be to try to maintain atheism. See, the Christian, we can put it all on the table. We say, bring it all. Bring all your facts, bring all your evidence. The only way to account for any of it is the God of the Bible, including mathematical truths, which I talked about earlier. So if you have any questions or comments, please leave them. If you can, go to our YouTube channel at Cross and Crown Radio and subscribe. That really helps a lot. That's Cross and Crown Radio on YouTube. You'll see lots of our videos. We do apologetic videos, and we are those who stand for and press and assert and demonstrate certainty of the Christian faith. So we don't say just probably true, or we have some good evidence that it might be true. We demonstrate that it is certainly true. And we talk about multiple subjects, including moral law, including Hinduism, Islam, including UFOs, time travel, whole host of ideas, including what about those who've never heard the gospel. We also talk about the difference between animals and humans. We talk about the difference between animals and humans also, or that would be vegetables and animals and humans, excuse me. So there's videos on those subjects as well as hundreds and hundreds of more. But you can get those videos, and people tell me they like to listen to them, sometimes late at night or in the afternoon, drinking some tea, having a little donut or some cookies or something, and listening to them, because most of them are 40 minutes to an hour. And like I said, a variety of subjects. And so you can always find something that's interesting there. There's a donation button at the top of that YouTube channel, which would help, as well as this particular description on this video on Facebook. You can see our Patreon link and help us out there if you can. But let us know what subject you want to talk about. We got some really interesting ones coming up, including, like I said, the full hour on math and God, how mathematics requires God. We're also doing shows on how science requires God and many, many others. So this is Pastor Mike Robinson. Until next time, saying may God richly bless you.
Hey guys, you can really help us if you donate to our worldwide media outreach. Just go to our Patreon page at Mike Robinson Apologetics on Patreon, or click the donate button on our main page on YouTube and give as the Lord leads. Thank you so much.